Do you have a thirst to learn about wine? Do you love stories about wonderfully obsessive people, hauntingly beautiful places, and amusingly awkward social situations? Well, that's the blend here on the Unreserved Wine Talk podcast. I'm your host, Natalie McLean, and each week I share with you unfiltered conversations with celebrities in the wine world, as well as confessions from my own tipsy journey as I write my third book on this subject. I'm so glad you're here. Now pass me that bottle, please, and let's get started. Welcome to episode 18. Does wine make you fat? Can you drink wine while you're on a diet? And how about diets like Paleo, Keto, South Beach, Atkins, and Gluten-Free? How does wine fit or not with those programs? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dive into this week. Before we get started, I'd like to give a shout out to Gilles Monvoisin, who emailed me about episode 16, which was about the difference between organic and biodynamic wines. So if you missed that one, go back and take a listen. Gilles says, quote, "Hello, Natalie. We're a family of 3 from Ottawa who are currently on an adventure in southern France in the Languedoc-Corbière region. We live in the village of Mont-Laur, population 500, where there are 5 wineries and dozens more just a kilometer down the road. You spoke about bio wines last week on the podcast. I'd say bio wines are the norm here, with all the smaller wineries producing them. We've tried a few of the wines, and I'd say for the most part they're pretty good. Needless to say, we have tried many wines. Our adventure is ending soon, and we'll be coming back home in early April. Thank you for keeping us informed. P.S. I'm drinking a cheap rosé at the moment." He almost ends with that proudly. He emailed me a lovely picture of a glass of rosé that has a condensation, and it's sitting on this little rustic table in the backyard with all the flowers blooming. Gilles, I am so glad you're enjoying this podcast with your family on vacation. Enjoy every last minute of it. I'd love to share reviews of this podcast for those of you kind enough, like Gilles, to post them on either Apple Podcasts, social media, or email me. If you want me to mention your website and social media handle, then please include that in your review, along with your name. I want to celebrate you and let others know how to connect with you online. Now, by the time I publish this podcast, there'll likely be yet another new study about wine and diet or wine and health. So I suggest that you always look for the latest findings. Also, I'm not a doctor or a nutritionist, so this podcast is not meant as medical or health advice. Always talk with your doctor when it comes to diet, wine consumption, or other health-related issues, as everyone is unique in body chemistry and history. Why do I feel like I've just read that quick blurb they have on pill and medical commercials in the US? Anyway, if you're interested in more wine and health issues, from cancer and heart disease to diabetes and dementia, go back and listen to episode 5 with Dr. Edward Miller. I'll include a link to that episode in the show notes for this podcast at nataliemclean.com/18. My dieting heroine is Bridget Jones from the movie of the same name. Not because she was that successful in losing weight, but because she never abandoned her glass of Chardonnay and still managed to snag Colin Firth. Yes, please. For me, dieting is unbearable if I have to give up all sweets, aka my kryptonite being chocolate-covered almonds, and my wine. And if I stopped drinking, I'd be out of a job. That said, here's a confession. Knowing that wine adds to the calorie count does help me keep my intake moderate. It's one of those natural consequences, along with having a cruddy next day, that keeps me in line. I need those consequences. Do you? I'm not alone here, am I? The good news is that you can drink wine without getting fat. When it comes to both calories and carbohydrates, moderate wine drinking won't ruin your diet. Wine has no cholesterol, sodium, or fat, and it's low in carbohydrates. Several studies indicate that drinking a glass or two of wine a day may have little impact on our weight. Regular moderate wine drinkers tend overall to be slimmer than teetotalers, according to a study published in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition. A 1991 Harvard study, which followed 138,000 men and women over 10 years, found that increasing their alcohol intake didn't cause the subjects to gain weight. In fact, the women decreased their body weight by an average of 15% instead of gaining the weight predicted according to the calories they consumed. Intriguingly, the men's weight stayed the same. Scientists were mystified about this because it runs counter to the expectation of wine being fattening, since it does add calories and should give us the munchies. Wine raises blood sugar levels and then drops them quickly, which can result in food cravings. One reason for the lack of weight gain may be that the human body treats alcohol like a toxin. So, unlike most foods, wine is processed by the liver rather than the stomach to remove it from our system quickly. Our livers convert most of the wine into a relatively benign acetate, which it releases into the blood. Very little is turned into fat, and the body burns this acetate for fuel before it starts burning its own stores of fat. As well, it's thought that antioxidants and flavonoids in wine possibly also accelerate the breakdown of body fat. Of course, calories consumed aren't the only predictor of weight gain. Other factors play a role too. For instance, moderate drinkers tend to have healthy lifestyles that include good diet and exercise. Perhaps they also have a natural tendency to be slimmer with higher metabolisms. For the gender difference, some scientists hypothesize that women may metabolize alcohol differently from men. The calories in wine somehow burn more quickly. Just how many calories are there in alcohol? All alcohol, including wine, contains 7 calories per gram. That's less than fat itself, which has 9, and more than the 4 calories in both protein and sugar. In terms of what you actually drink, a 5-ounce glass of dry red or white has an average of 110 calories. The total calories per glass depends on sugar and alcohol content, and that varies from wine to wine. The alcoholic strength is expressed as a percentage of the bottle by volume and is usually noted in really, really tiny mice type in the bottom of the label. Alcohol contributes more calories than sugar. For example, a 6-ounce glass of slightly sweet German Riesling with just 7% alcohol will still have fewer calories, about 110, than a dry, robust Australian Shiraz with 15% alcohol at about 175 calories. Over the past 5 years, the level of alcohol in many wines has been increasing steadily. This is particularly true for wines from warm climates in Australia, Chile, and California, among others. Grapes are being picked later in the season when they're riper and more laden with sugar, and consequently get fermented into higher alcohol wines. The combined sweetness and alcohol in dessert and fortified wines also makes them caloric. For example, a 2-ounce glass of port at 20% alcohol with 10% residual or leftover sugar has about 300 calories. By contrast, a 12-ounce bottle of beer has 150 calories, and an 8-ounce glass of whole milk has 160. For those people on the Atkins diet, as more than 60 million North Americans are, dry wine looks better. Carbohydrates are essentially sugars, either simple, like honey, sugar, and candy, or complex, fruit, vegetables, bread. A slice of bread, for example, has about 15 grams of carbohydrates. Although wine derives from fruit, dry wine isn't considered a carbohydrate because the fermentation process converts all the grape sugar into alcohol. You sometimes find the sugar level of a wine on the store shelf tag expressed as a number, with 0 meaning completely dry, 1 meaning it has a little sweetness, and so on. Sometimes there are letters, like I use on my site, with XD meaning extra dry, a step up, and so on. A 5-ounce glass of wine has just 1.25 grams of sugar. A 5-ounce glass of dry wine has just 1.25 grams of sugar, well under the 7 grams that's considered low carb and would have made the late Dr. Atkins happy. Actually, both the Atkins and South Beach diets recommend cutting out wine altogether during the initial 2-week induction phase because your liver has to process alcohol before your body can start burning fat. This is similar to many keto diet recommendations, especially for those first 30 days, so that your body starts burning fat immediately rather than the alcohol in your system. After that, experts say that you can stay in ketosis, that state of burning the body's stored fat, and enjoy a moderate amount of dry wine. The keto recommendations are pretty much the same for those in the paleo diet. Most wines are considered gluten-free because they're made from grapes, not grains. However, a few winemakers use flour or wheat paste to seal the oak barrels in which the wine is aged. This may result in less than 20 parts per million of gluten in the wine, which is minuscule. But for a person with celiac disease and/or a high sensitivity, even this amount may cause a reaction. So check with the winemaker and your doctor to be sure. Some of these diets may seem faddish, but several wine producers have taken notice. Several years ago, an American wine and spirits company launched 2 low-carb wines. They were called 1.6 Chardonnay and 1.9 Merlot. Their names indicate the carb counts per 5-ounce glass, which is only half of what's in most wines. The secret, apparently, was, quote, a powerhouse yeast that ferments all of the residual sugar in the wine. However, this also increases the calorie count. The low-carb wines had alcohol levels of 13.5%, making them full body both on the mouth and on the hips. 1.6 Chardonnay has 120 calories per glass and 1.9 125. Other companies, rather than formulating new wines, have simply relabeled existing brands. Another American producer created bottleneck tags for its California wines, such as Beaulieu Vineyard, BV Coastal, and Sterling Vintners Collection and Century Cellars, to indicate that they're low carb and they give calorie counts. The company is also using this labeling for some of its spirits, such as Smirnoff vodka, although the mixers that often accompany spirits are not low carb. Several years ago, the U.S. Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau ruled that wine producers could include such information on their labels. Until then, wine has never been considered a food, and therefore it was never required or permitted to advertise health benefits. But the Bureau has reservations about even this practice. Quote, even the moderate consumption of alcoholic beverages poses health risks for some individuals, its ruling stated. Labeling or advertising statements that imply that the consumption of low-calorie or low-carb alcoholic beverages is a healthy dietary practice are misleading unless they present the facts to the consumer. End quote. The irony, of course, is that all dry wine qualifies as low carb, whether it says so on the label or not. And for different marketing reasons, other wine producers hesitate to jump on the low carb bandwagon. Some believe that it would give consumers the impression that their other wines, not being labeled, are therefore high in carbohydrates. Others think these claims would diminish their upscale image. But if the initial sales are any indication, such fears may be groundless. Within 2 weeks of announcing their low-carb wines, the company received orders for more than 200,000 cases. The beer market has also had similar success. When Michelob Ultra Low Carb beer launched, it became Anheuser-Busch's fastest growing brand ever. Low-calorie light beers comprise about 40% of the US beer market. Is it even worth trying to save a couple of carbohydrates by drinking these wines? While every carb may count for some dieters, carbs from wine represent a small fraction of the total 50 to 60 carbs recommended in the Atkins diet. Other winemakers are exploring low-calorie products. The Australian winery Swaying Willow launched a wine that Bridget Jones would love, a diet Chardonnay, with almost all of the alcohol spun out in a centrifuge. That's a spinning techie thing in some wineries. The wine has just 35 calories per glass and 1.2% alcohol. Several wine critics who've tasted it say that it lacks both body and taste. Ahem. Weight Watchers has also launched its own label of low-alcohol Riesling in the UK with just 80 calories per glass. Its grapes come from the Moselle region of Germany, a cool climate where the fruit doesn't reach high levels of ripeness or sweetness. The wine is worth just 1 point of a daily 20 points that Weight Watchers allows dieters, as compared to the 1.5 points for all other wines. A low-cal bubbly seems like rather a niche market, and yet two French champagne houses, Laurent Perrier Ultra Brut and Piper Heidsieck Brut Sauvage, have produced two low-alcohol styles. According to Joan Oliphant Fraser, the author of The Champagne Diet, and also a Dame Chevalier of l'Ordre de Côte de Champagne, some of the biggest fans of these champagnes are racing jockeys who have kept their weight down but still want to celebrate their victories in style. You go, guys and gals. Of course, when it comes to wine, moderation is key. Drinking more than 1 or 2 glasses a day will pile on the calories, as well as increasing your chances of liver damage and other health problems. But let's look at this the other way around. If we cut down on fatty foods and sugary drinks, there's still plenty room for a glass or 2 of wine a day. This is what I tell myself. Such moderate tippling uses up only about 6% of our recommended caloric intake, leaving room for other nutrients alongside our wine, even those dreaded carrot sticks. And when it comes to eating raw carrot sticks and skinless chicken, a little vino sure makes life more palatable. Bridget Jones may not have known that, but Renée Zellweger, who played the character, appears to have. She shed 30 pounds after filming for the movie was finished. My secret hope is that she was still drinking Chardonnay when the cameras stopped rolling. How about you? Do you think about the calories in wine? Does it have an impact on your consumption? Are you on one of the diets I mentioned and you've still managed to keep wine in your life? Or maybe you haven't. Share that with me, please. You can tag me on Twitter or Facebook at Natalie McLean, and on Instagram, I'm at Natalie McLean Wine. You'll find links to all of my wine reviews. All of them have both the alcoholic and sugar content of each wine in the show notes at nataliemclean.com/18. Next week, we'll chat with Arvid Rosengren, who won the world's best sommelier competition. Whew. He's going to share his best tips on choosing wine from a restaurant list, as well as pairing wine and food and lots of other great tips. If you like this episode, please tell a friend about it. My podcast is easy to find whether you search on its name, Unreserved Wine Talk, or on my name. I can't wait to share more personal wine stories with you. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this one. I hope something great is in your glass this week. You don't want to miss one juicy episode of this podcast, especially the secret, full-bodied bonus episodes that I don't announce on social media. So, subscribe for free now at nataliemclean.com/subscribe. Meet me here next week. Cheers.